I'm James Just, and welcome to Libertarian Counterpoint. I hope you're having a wonderful day with your loved ones, enjoying good food and feeling grateful for the blessings in your life. I know this year has been challenging for many of us, but I also believe that we have grown stronger and more resilient because of it. I want to thank you for being part of my journey and for your support and kindness. You mean the world to me, and I appreciate you more than words can say. Let's celebrate this day with joy, gratitude, and the knowledge that we are not alone. We have each other, and that's the most precious gift of all. Thank you for tuning in every week and allowing us into your homes and lives. You have seen their names scroll across the screen every show, but I want to mention them again. Our amazing team, Kelly Stevenson, Daniel Jolly, Anthony Just, and Gail Morgan. They tirelessly volunteer their time to make this show possible. Thank you. And I want to thank our past guests and hosts who bring their expertise and insights to enrich our discussions. John Kabatek, Bruce Lee, Leon Brathwaite, Jason McPhee, Tyler Kuski, Mike Giles, Michael Hale, Michael Graves, Pam and Mark Olson, Gia Christopher, Tanya Collins, Nicholas Wildstar, Kalish Merrill, and many more. You have honored us with your presence and your contributions. We often receive help from those here at Access Sacramento, and we are grateful for their assistance and professionalism. We thank Brianna, Lorraine, Marcus, Carlos, TD, Donna. Thank you. And to Rick and Travers Stewart, who get the studio ready for us every week. You guys are the best. Thank you. And I also want to thank those who have paved the way for this show. Art Tuma, Dr. Stephen Hoverman, Dr. Lee Welter, David Henderson, Tony Lavelle, David Mahoney, and more. It was you who made the show possible and inspired us to carry on its legacy. And last but not least, I want to express my deep appreciation to Richard Fields and John Cameron. You have left footprints I cannot possibly fill, but it is an honor to try. I wouldn't be who I am today without this opportunity and your example. Thank you. From our families to yours, have a happy Thanksgiving and enjoy tonight's show with me and Jason McPhee.
Every week.
Well, we certainly want to thank you for being here as our host. I'm not sure if they can see you, but I want to thank you.
We'll see how that one goes. So, and the people of San Francisco might be thankful. Well, I guess it was, 10 days ago now. It's people of San Francisco were thankful that their streets were cleaned for, a day anyway.
Yeah, which is that in itself is a small miracle.
It's a small miracle, but the problem is they didn't clean it up for the citizens of San Francisco. Citizens of San Francisco have been complaining about streets needing cleaned up and the filth and just kind of, hey, our city is deteriorating. Can we do something? And the city has done essentially nothing. But if you're a dictator from China, they will clean the streets, put up walls, do all kinds of stuff that the average citizen couldn't get done for years.
That's just a show of affection from one dictator to another. So Gavin Newsom wanted to make sure that he showed his props for a fellow dictator.
But if I lived in San Francisco, that would be insanely frustrating for me, right? If you've been begging for years to get your streets cleaned up, you've been begging for years for solutions, but yet you get some Chinese dignitary, doesn't even matter what or where, any dignitary will come in for a day, and they can somehow manage to clean up the streets, and so they know how to do it, but they refuse to. And the question is, why are they actually refusing to? It's not like they don't spend enough money. They spend plenty of money on homelessness programs and poverty programs in San Francisco, so the money is going somewhere other than its intended use. Or maybe its intended use isn't really its intended use, is probably a...
Yeah, I suspect that it's just going for all kinds of other crazy stuff. I mean, one of the other little side stories in this too is that a couple days ago there was one of the foreign news crews was out there doing B footage for this event, and they were robbed at gunpoint and had all of their equipment stolen. So I mean, this is just sort of indicative of what San Francisco has become, and it's sad, but that's sort of I guess what you come to expect of bluetopias nowadays.
Yeah, it's difficult, right? Because we all, especially for us libertarians, this is a difficult conversation to have because we don't think that government has made it expensive and difficult to exist in California. So the fact that the homeless population has exploded to us is, we predicted this 20 years ago, right? This is going to happen. And so in a sense, we don't really blame a lot of the homeless people. You know, people are homeless essentially because if you can't afford to live in California, you end up homeless, and it becomes a death spiral for you as a person. But at the same time, you know, the second half of liberty, the flip side of that liberty coin, is responsibility. And while you are within your rights, you can destroy your own life if you want to, right? But what you can't do is make the life of the person sitting next to you miserable in that process. And that's what's happened in San Francisco, is they've gone to the point where you no longer have the responsibility to be at least a decent citizen. You know, even if you're homeless, you can still be a decent citizen. You know, and we've kind of skipped past that. And we've gone from, you know, expecting at least decent moral behavior, you know, on some level, to accepting anything. And
it just seems like a failure on so many levels, though. And you know, this didn't just happen overnight. It's funny. Our current governor used to be the mayor there in San Francisco, and when he became mayor, he promised a 10-year program. This was back about, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. Yeah. And he said that he was going to deal with the homeless problem, and in 10 years he'd have it done. Well, it hasn't really dealt with it in the way I think most of us would have anticipated. Instead, he's just expanded it throughout the state. and of course, you know, that kind of failure succeeds upwards in politics in California.
And we also understand that, you know, when we call it the homeless industrial complex. Well, if they solve the homeless problem, then that homelessness industrial complex no longer exists. And so there's this strange thing when the government starts to feed these kind of, what we call them complexes, is that now the people who work in those complexes, be they nonprofits, be they government workers, well, they have to have the problem continue, otherwise their existence kind of goes away.
Sort of like the military-industrial complex, where there's a defense always in search of a war.
Yeah, because, well, you don't need to build new bombs if there's still a warehouse full of old ones, right? And so you've got to find some way to use your ordinance. And so, you know, but there may be some hope in California. You know, I think our friend Richard Fields was having a conversation, is talking today about California deregulation, which is something that might surprise all of us. Is California actually going towards deregulation? Let's find out what Richard has to say from the field.
Real political change is usually incremental. The economic ideas of John Locke, David Hume, Frederick Bastiat, and other political economic writers were taking hold before and as the United States was becoming its own country. Our country's founders borrowed liberally from those thinkers in writing the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The idea of private property being available to all men and eventually all women, not just the nobility, was an incremental innovation at the time of the American Revolution. Economic freedom and intellectual freedom, as articulated in the Bill of Rights, laid the groundwork for 2 centuries of spectacular growth and prosperity. But old ideas rooted in envy and the superiority of elites slowly made their way back to public debate during the Progressive era. They came to fruition during the New Deal years and with LBJ's Great Society. The idea of promoting equality through income redistribution and prioritizing specific social goals through regulation also gained ascendancy. Think the environmental movement and now climate change. Problem is, all of this robbing Peter to pay Paul and nitpicking regulation slowly slowed down the high growth rates of the more laissez-faire preceding era, particularly in the states that did it most. Think California. It's now to the point where the normally clueless California Governor Gavin Newsom has noticed that people are leaving California for other states. He has correctly identified relatively expensive California housing as one of the causes of that out-migration. And he has correctly recognized that our overzealous zoning and environmental regulation are contributing factors. He wants to stop that out-migration of taxpayers, citizens. Enter the liberal phenomena of YIMBY, yes in my backyard, abundance agenda liberals. Their reasons to deregulate are not libertarian. They want to retain more taxpayers to fund their ambitious big government programs. But their method, deregulation in zoning and in the environmental space, are decidedly libertarian. Deregulation and sensible environmental rules will definitely produce more abundance. Whether that abundance is retained by its creators or is siphoned off to government coffers is something that liberals and libertarians will always disagree on. But deregulation is an incremental change for the better, and libertarians should warily cooperate. That's Report from the Fields. I'm Richard Fields. See you next week.
And you know, my thing is, when a lot of times we talk about deregulation, what we're actually talking about is re-regulation. One of the biggest ones was the electricity market, a number of years ago. They deregulated the electricity market, but they actually didn't. There was more regulations at the end of it than there was before they started. So it was just they re-regulated it. And that's kind of what I'm concerned about. Now, genuine deregulation, I'm all for, but I somehow doubt that this Democrat deregulation is actually deregulation. They're just re-regulating things in a different way.
One thing I think you have to be careful about, I mean, certainly the ideal for a libertarian is that we are very cautious about regulating in the first place. But once you get those regulations in, you have to be really careful about how you just pull them out. Because if you just yank them out, there may be a whole bunch of incentives that have been set up there, and that's what happened in the energy market. They had all of these crazy rules and restrictions, and then when you just rip out part of them, but not all of them, then suddenly there's all of these perverse incentives that happen, and I think that's what sort of allowed Enron and some of those others to game the market back then.
Part of the problem is the bureaucrats and the politicians don't understand markets.
Yeah.
And so they don't understand the incentives that they're actually incentivizing. Right? They think they do, but they actually don't understand that people are smart, and they'll look at those regulations, and they'll figure out some weird strategy that they never contemplated.
Well, I think maybe a good analogy is that when you make a regulation, it's almost like you're for a lot of regulations that are poor regulations, you're crafting a bomb, and you can't just to de-wire it. You got to be really careful about how you take it apart. You can't just go ripping a few wires out here and there, or you're going to maybe create a worse mess.
You might create a worse mess than you started with, and I think that's what we need to be careful with, is because the deregulation that's not really deregulation, it's just changing the regulations, might end up having worse problems, because you may end up with developments that don't work, economically, but they've been incentivized from some local, some local perspective. And we've seen that, and we see that all the time, is where a project is only viable because of a big subsidy or a tax credit or something. And then once that project actually is developed, then the same people who put in those tax credits and subsidies complain about them. So that's kind of the problem.
I think probably the biggest thing is if we could just convince people not to look to government for most of these things in the first place, and then if we could get that mindset set, I think we'd be a heck of a lot better off than worried about not even convincing people of that, and then just start ripping out things here and there. It just creates a big mess.
Yeah, we're trying to fix a problem by creating, and we just create another rat's nest. But maybe the Supreme Court is there's a path to the Supreme Court to maybe disentangling some of this rat's nest. The Supreme Court has an opportunity to not let bureaucrats just kind of invent crimes. And this is over the bump stock ban that I guess Trump put in the bump stock ban, right?
Yep.
Trump put in the bump stock ban, but it wasn't actually Trump, it was bureaucrats. Bureaucrats just kind of invented a crime. And so
that's because they tried to do it at the executive level. So they tried to take an existing statute and then just rearrange how they're going to enforce it.
Yeah, reinterpret what the law actually means. And the problem is that now you made a bunch of people who made honest, decisions to buy certain pieces of equipment, that now all of a sudden now they're criminals. Overnight, a lot of people became criminals, and we have rules against that in the Constitution. And so you can't turn someone into a criminal overnight. You can't take a legal behavior that was legal yesterday and all of a sudden they become, criminals because of it. We've kind of decided all that. And the Supreme Court has a chance. I mean, that's one of the things us libertarians are thankful for, is the potential that, our First Amendments and Second Amendments are, have an opportunity to be stood up for when they haven't been in the last 20, 30 years.
Well, and one of the things where I think we can, bump stocks may not seem like something that affects a lot of people, but I think we saw during the COVID lockdowns how interpretations by the executive office can just wildly affect society, and that's exactly what happened. That was all happening at the executive level during COVID lockdowns, and so things that were most people imagined an emergency might be something that was 2 weeks to stop the spread. Suddenly it turned into 2 years, and then we'll tell you what we think then.
Yeah, and it's not even about, really, it's not even actually about the bump stock. It's about, can a bureaucracy just decide to make, by itself, decide to change law, which is essentially what's happening. Can it decide to reinterpret, massively reinterpret law? Not just we're talking about a small, tweak of the interpretation. We're talking a massive reinterpretation of the law. And so, all right, so we're going to move on. As we talk, thinking about libertarians and their path to a more impactful future, right? Is it time for libertarians to start thinking local and maybe try to win, or should libertarians continue to think more holistically and run at the national, state, and local levels? I mean, because this is a conversation that is happening within the political party and within the political operatives and activists. It's something we're discussing. And so, maybe it's something that we as libertarian thinkers and, citizens should actually engage in this conversation. Now, I have my own perspective, Jason, but let's hear from yours.
Well, I think it's a story of resources and the fact that libertarians tend to not have many resources. Part of the reason we don't have many resources is because we're not in bed with a bunch of concentrated interests promising them all kinds of goodies if we get into office. So we don't tend to have the same amount of resources that both the red and blue duopoly have. But I think that as far as focusing those resources on the best opportunities, I think that is a good strategy to think local. But I would like us, when there's a very bad candidates from both sides, for us to be giving a choice to the voters in those, because at least that brings some attention, that when people think, oh my God, it's Trump and Biden again, it's like, one may wind up going to jail, and maybe there's some unfairness in some of that, and the other is clearly corrupt and nobody will investigate. And it's like, it's just two terrible choices. And wouldn't it be nice if there was some sort of rational third choice up there for voters?
Yeah, well, okay, my perspective on this as kind of the political operative, we need to do all three. And the fact is, if we're not doing all three, we're not going to accomplish any one of them. And it's because the top runners, people who run for governors, Senate, president, they give legitimacy to those people at the local level. And those people at the local level actually give legitimacy to those who are running at the top. So you need both, because they support each other. This is a real party. Look, we have people running for Senate and we have people running for president. Hey, look, this is a real party. We're running at the local, for school boards, for city councils, for water districts, for all those various things. We have to do all of it. And the real reality is, yes, we're low on resources. Doesn't matter. We have to find a way. And it's, instead of complaining about having to do all of it, not having enough resources, spend that energy we spent complaining about not having the resources to figuring out how to go around not having the resources. Yeah. This is not, you do not need the same amount of money that they do, because one of the things I learned running for office is that it's actually not, what they spend is not what it costs. Those are two vastly different things. All right, we've got 7-8 minutes. So, is Wichita Mayor-Elect Lily Wu a libertarian? So in Wichita has recently elected a mayor, and mayor's offices are generally nonpartisan, but she is registered as a libertarian. And so does that, that's something we don't actually talk about a lot, is how many of these mayors, city council members are, even if they're not Libertarian Party, are the libertarian thought friendly? You don't have to be a hardcore libertarian to promote liberty, to get us farther down the road. we all like to look at the activists and say, well, that's the libertarian, but we're not going to get there for a long time. So we need people like Lily Wu to kind of bridge the gap, right?
Oh, I think so. Certainly anybody who can promote ideas of liberty is great. I do get a little bit concerned when I guess some people claim the mantle of the Liberty Party and then they go off and they do things that are decided unlibertarian. And I think that could potentially sour people to us, and they think, well, maybe we're just Republican light or something else like that. But certainly, I don't know a lot about Lily Wu, but at least from what I read briefly in the Reason article, it didn't sound like there was any showstoppers for libertarians.
Well, well, it depends on the libertarians. The showstopper, she's willing to compromise.
Okay.
Right, and so, she's a libertarian on a city council. She's going to have to compromise to get anything done. And the libertarian activist crowd doesn't like that, right?
Well, my thought in that is, because clearly if you're going to be in government, there's going to have to be some compromise. But if you could at least, as the libertarian, the liberty-minded person, say what the end goal is, and then you say, okay, we can't get there this time because of this, this, and that, so we're going to now try to get to this step that's on the way there, and that way you can be true to your constituents, saying that, hey, look, we're not hiding the ball here. We're telling everybody what the real goal is, but we're just saying, hey, look, being what it is right now and that we don't have all the power, we're going to have to compromise. And
we don't have, not even just we don't have the power, we don't have the buy-in from citizens yet.
Yeah.
Right? We have to earn trust, and you earn that trust by being willing to compromise and work your way through. I mean, right now, just stopping going the wrong direction is a highly libertarian thing, right? We don't even need to start going the other way yet. If you can just stop going.
Put the brakes on.
Man, I will take it. All right, some libertarians are sensing a golden opportunity to make a breakthrough in 2024. I am personally a bit more skeptical. As someone who has seen the data of the Libertarian Party is hemorrhaging members at the moment, and part of the problem is the activist nature of the party at the moment. A party is built by and for activists, and when you're a small, young party, that's the nature of the beast. But we're no longer young. We're a middle-aged party now. We're 50 years old, and so we're no longer young. We have to grow out of that activist stage, and until we manage to do that and then get a more representative mindset in our leadership, we're not going to be able to make a breakthrough. Sadly.
Well, I think too, a lot of people, maybe their expectations aren't maybe what they should be, in the sense that the deck is completely stacked against the Libertarian Party. It's stacked against every third party. And, the red-blue duopoly have literally set the rules up in a lot of places where you just can't even get on the ballot unless you cross these massive thresholds that they keep changing. Every time a libertarian meets the threshold, they say, uh-oh, and then they change the threshold so that they raise it. Yeah. It's like a reverse limbo game.
Yeah, especially in places like New York where the political machine is seriously embedded,
Yeah.
right? In California, it's not so bad because we actually have it really good here in California, despite the problems with like the top two. We actually have it, comparatively speaking, we have it pretty good. But yeah, a lot of these places are just awful. Anytime, and it's not just libertarians, the Green Party, they do the same thing to the Green Party as they do to the libertarians. They do everything they can to keep us off ballots, to keep us, hidden from view. And so that's why it's important for us to do things like this. Go ahead.
But one of the things when they talk about opportunity, I think opportunity presents itself when the other parties are so terrible that, it's like if there were just a third choice there. And this is why it really kills me when guys like Ron Paul and others who have carried the torch for liberty, they don't come out and endorse the Libertarian candidate. And it just, or even run as the Libertarian candidate. I mean, if a guy like Rand Paul came out and ran as a Libertarian, that wouldn't turn heads. That wouldn't get a lot of. It wouldn't get him on the debate stage with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, it's we don't do the things that we need to do, but we are working out. Okay, Jason. So what are some things libertarians can be thankful for? I've got a small list here, and we'll see if we can come up with some. The existence of a free-ish market that allows for voluntary exchange and innovation. That's something that libertarians can kind of agree on. We all kind of like. We're thankful for protection of individual rights and civil liberties by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Okay, neither of the duopoly parties who run the country at the moment actually believe those, but they still exist, and they still actually kind of have to work through it. It does slow them down some, so there's some thankfulness in that. We are thankful for the diversity of opinions and perspectives that enrich the public discourse, changes our status quo, and most importantly, that diversity of opinions and perspectives, it breeds innovation. And that's something libertarians are highly thankful for. Growth of alternative media and platforms, so we can actually get out there and help spread the voice without having to spend $100 million to participate like we used to have to do, not all that long ago.
Getting around the gatekeepers.
Yeah, and it can be difficult, if we have found out, but there's still ways around it, and so that's we're thankful for that. And the courage of the activists who stand up for freedom and justice. And as much as I complain about activists, who run the party, we need them. We need those activists, because without activists, we don't know where we're going. They're the ones, I like to say, they kind of give us the North Star. You can never reach the North Star, but you can use it as a guide.
Yeah. Well, and I guess we can be thankful that there are some people out there who are willing to stand when we're essentially a country where it feels like we're a sea of sheep, especially after the whole lockdowns that we just went through. And you saw how many people folded on liberty so fast, and the fact that there are some liberty-minded people standing up there trying to fight the fight. And that's hard. It's not easy to be the ones to stand out and maybe take the slings and arrows of the mob. But we do have people who are liberty-minded people in the community who are standing up out there to say, hey, there's something else.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jason, for being here. I want to thank all of you again for watching and letting us into your rooms, into your homes, or rooms, I suppose. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I want to thank Access Sacramento for letting us be here. And you got any final thoughts, Jason? We got 20 seconds. Actually, I am thankful for our executive producer, Gail. His medical numbers came back positive. They're all good. So we'll thank him for that. And I've got mine coming up, so we'll see if my medical numbers, I'll know by the time this is on, actually, if my medical numbers are good enough. So things are looking up.
And I'll be thankful if my car is still outside when the show's over.
we don't live in San Francisco. Come on. And thank you for watching. Good night. Please remember to love everybody.